Welcome to Wireless LAN Weekly, a podcast focused on the wireless networking professional. We aim to educate, inform, entertain, and inspire. Get ready to listen and enjoy. Now to our host of the show, Keith Parsons.
Welcome back again. This is Keith Parsons, host of Wireless LAN Weekly. We're glad you joined us for episode number 24. In today's episode, we'll be talking with Ron Nutter. Ron Nutter's been the help desk editor of Network World for over 17 years. I've known Ron for many of those years. We used to work together on the CNEPA. If any of you remember that old organization, we're on the Communications Committee together. And Ron's going to be talking with us about Network Engineer's Guide for Moving from Windows to Mac. It's a ebook that he just released out on his new blog site, and it's a free download, easy for you to go and get. So we're going to talk a little bit today about moving from a Windows to a Mac as a network engineer. Ron, glad to have you join us today. How are you?
Oh, can't complain. And trust me, once you move to the Mac, you're not going back to Windows.
So you turned it into a fanboy, huh?
Not really. I'd had a Mac Mini in my studio for several years where I produced the two podcasts that I've got. And it was a nice little way to take the audio from Skype and run it into the mixer and go. And that's kind of where it stood. And then my BlackBerry decided to start dying a slow and painful death. And I said, well, I'm not spending $50 for a battery, even for a little bit more, and get a new phone. So I said, well, you know what? I've been hearing about these iPhones. I'll go get one of those. Got one. Well, a few weeks later, the iPads came out. I said, that's got some possibilities. Got one of those. 3 weeks later, well, at that point, the Apple Store was beginning to know me on a first-name basis. And I said, I'll take one of the MacBook Pros, 15-inch top-of-the-line display. And they said, well, yeah, we just have got one left. I said, it's fine. It's going.
And you become a Mac person just in the last couple months, sounds like.
It really, I've kind of gotten hardcore into it. I have dealt with Macs on and off since, 96, 97, and they're light years beyond where they were.
Well, a little bit of your history. You've been editor and having articles in Network World for, what'd you say, 17 years now? 17 years,
have written 2 books. Wouldn't suggest writing the books. That's long hours, and, well, you can make more working at McDonald's after you figure out what you spent the number of hours writing the book.
And it was on Help Desk, right?
Both were actually on Novell products. One was kind of the whole Novell product line at that point in time, and then another one I did was strictly on the GroupWise line, because there was so much that Novell had acquired after the WordPerfect acquisition.
And then since then, you've been working on the side. I mean, obviously, you're an editor working for Network World, but you also have a full-time job supporting networks. So you've had experience with what kind of networking hardware?
A lot was Cisco. I've had background with Nortel, although I tell you, having worked with it, I'll take Cisco pretty much any day of the week. The network I handle during the day is, right now we're touching, technically 2 continents. I've got close to 5,000 users I have to support. I've got numerous VPN site-to-site tunnels. I've got, as of about 2 weeks from now, I'll have 7 different ASAs I'm supporting during the day, 5 IPS sensors. Oh, and a partridge and a pear tree comes in there somewhere.
And for our audience, since this is Wireless LAN Weekly, tell us a little bit about your wireless LAN you're supporting.
Well, we're a part of the way through deployment on that. I've got a pair of the 5508 wireless LAN controllers, and we've got a combination of 1142, which can natively set up for lightweight use, and then I've converted about 100 or so of the 1130 access points from autonomous to lightweight.
Well, the reason I asked those questions, just to set a little background for before we move into your article, and we'll talk about some of the ideas and techniques you used in moving from a Windows platform to support you as a network engineer over to Macintosh. Wanted to let's just set a little baseline there so folks know, you understood Novell and Microsoft and Cisco and Nortel and wireless and the whole bit. So some of the tools we'll be talking about here in our interview have to do with how you use a Mac to do some configuring you used before. So let's start right in the article. And the very first thing, and I like the way you started here because it's kind of the first thing a lot of people hit. Where is that serial port? So tell us a little bit about your experience in the missing serial port.
Well, I had over the years, I've had some laptops off and on that did not have a serial port, and so I'd kind of gone through the exercise before, but with the Macs, it was a little bit different because I was actually doing a dual learning curve. I was coming up to speed. I was going in the transition between Tiger to Leopard to Snow Leopard all within the course of about 4 weeks, and that was fun because there was minor changes as I went along, but trying to find a good USB to serial adapter that worked with the Mac and yet didn't require some under the hood coding to get things to work. Because one of the things that I found was a way to get it to work with the terminal program that ships with Mac OS, but you were still doing a lot of function shift, Apple, /, and I went, no, it's got to be easier than that, because what really got me going down the road was it was taking my company laptop, it was averaging between 4 to 5 minutes to start up and almost as long to shut down, where the MacBook Pro with the same amount of memory powers up and is ready to roll within about 23 seconds and shuts down in 5.
So that alone was worth it. So what did you end up with as your serial combo console for getting and accessing, I'm sure you get into APs and configure those, routers, switches, etc.
Yeah, what I got into was the Keyspan USA 19HS, and that was, after doing a lot of digging, seemed to be the best one overall because of the full support it had for all the serial handshaking that goes on. And with some Cisco devices are more sensitive to that than the others, especially if you get into some like it's the 4400 controller that for some bizarre reason ships with a DB9 port on the front. Of course, that's only almost as inexplicable as the high-end ASAs, the 5580s, that they give you a DB9 on the back when 98% of the Cisco line has the RJ45. So you're pretty much forced into doing something. And I wanted to find something that would have the proper handshaking, because so many of the El Cheapo converters will kind of work, kind of not. And when you've got a network down because you're having to make adjustments, or you've had a piece of gear fail and you're having to quickly reconfigure it on the fly, that's not the time to find out that you're dropping bits in what you're sending to the device and configuring it, and then you wonder why it goes south when you try to restart it.
So that's your choice of the serial to USB converter. What about your terminal port?
Well,
just the one that comes standard with OS X?
Sometimes I will. It kind of depends the mood I'm in. For the most part, what I started out with early on was something called CoolTerm, and that was one of the first things I found when I was going through the process of trying to see what was available on the Mac, because coming from a standpoint of ground zero, I didn't have some of the knowledge that a lot of the others do to get started. So, that was the one I found, and it was quick and dirty. Yeah, it had its quirks, but you know what? It was free, because after just having spent, a good fortune on the MacBook Pro, I didn't have, a lot of spare cash to be turning around and syncing into the programs. Yeah, that one got me started, and I went through a combination of others, found MacWise. It was a good program, but I was used to, from the Windows side, using Secure CRT. And that was where you have one screen up and you have all the tabs across, because it's not unusual when I'm working on the network I do during the day. I may have 10, 15 tabs open, because if I'm working on a regional problem, I may be looking at routers and switches in multiple offices trying to figure out where the problem is that I'm actually fighting. And being able to have one screen up that will show me all that was really nice. And in getting to know the guy who develops the ZOC program, and it's in the ebook that folks will be downloading here in a little bit. He actually told me a funny story. He's actually on pretty good terms with the folks at Van Dyke Software who do Secure CRT, and it seems like if he comes out with one feature this time, then the next time somebody's wanting a new feature, they seem to eke him out. So it's always kind of a cat and mouse game of who's going to have this next new feature in their next release.
So for that tabbed kind of environment, you go with ZOC?
ZOC, yeah. That was the one that it was the most comfortable for me and most quick to adapt to. And I raised one question to him when I was evaluating the program, and he says, "Oh, yeah, we're aware of that one. You can either check this option, and it will open up a new tab each time you start access to a different device? Or is it, give me a couple of weeks and it'll be in the next release? You can't get that with a lot of programs. Now you're sitting there and you fill out a help desk ticket and you might hear something in 6 months.
Well, that's good to hear. Well, another thing that you do a lot of with especially Cisco equipment is Telnet, SSH, and so you use ZOC for that. But what about the whole FTP series, TFTP and FTP on both the client and the server?
Well, that was one of the next challenges that I ran into because, I knew the programs to use from the Mac side of things, but I mean, from the PC side, but, the Mac was a little bit different. And I'm still, I learn every day that, while with Windows, you've got to go download this or you've got to go reg hack this. With Mac OS being built on top of essentially what's BSD Linux, it's already in there. It's just learning how to get to it. So if you've got the time, you can get to a lot of what is in the ebook that I've put out. But if you do a little bit of digging, and I go through the links and tell you where to find it, there are actually GUI front ends where you can activate the TFTP server that comes with it, where you can activate the FTP server that comes in it. And for those that are familiar with the HFS executable that's on Windows that makes your Windows a quick and dirty web server, so you can download files from that, because there are times with some of the Cisco devices that you literally may have to use HTTP to download the file, because some of these devices that are out there don't support TFTP, and sometimes you run across, shall we say, a feature in one version of iOS or another that FTP is broken. So it always is helpful to have more than one method of transfer in your bag of tricks, especially when you're in the Midwest and you may be transferring a file to something in Guam.
Well, personally, I've gone through a bunch of different FTP clients. Just using the browser is a nice FTP client as well. My personal favorite is one called Captain FTP. It's the one I've started to use pretty much full time now on my Mac. A whole bunch of other ones you might want to, just search Google for Mac and FTP, and there's a wide variety of tools available for you there, as well as the ones you mentioned in your article. You mentioned a couple other fun little pieces that your bag, obviously, and some pouches. But the thing I liked is a little adapter that does the roll for you, so you don't have to carry around those blue Cisco cables anymore.
Yeah, and I actually was not aware of those until I'd gone to a 2-week Cisco security boot camp, and as a treat, halfway through the time, I went to I was in Vegas for that, and went over to the local Fry's. Which, folks, if you've never been to a Fry's, it's worth whatever it takes to get there, because you will never forget it once you've been in one, and your local electronic store will never hold a candle to it. They had an adapter in there called a Super Looper from a company called Smartronix. And that one, they've got a whole host of the adapters. So me being the geek toy collector that I can be at times, they've got a whole assortment. They've got T1 loopbacks, they've got T1 crossovers, they've got everything. But the one that caught my attention was the one that turns a standard Ethernet cable into a Cisco console cable. And then the only missing piece out of that is you can usually find a supply of these somewhere, and they used to ship them with some of the older pieces of Cisco gear, and they still ship them now with some devices out there, and it's a DB9 to RJ45, and so between those two devices, it gets you from a DB9 into the RJ45 port of virtually any device, and you don't have to carry the special cable, because now that Cisco has gone green with their manufacturing, you're going to start to see the console cable come out less and less with all the devices. So if you've got a drawer of those cables now, you better hold on to them, because they will start disappearing.
Well, some of us have many drawers of them.
Yes.
Well, then you got onto the process, and I think I went through the same process as I moved from a PC to a Mac, and that was through the virtual machine cycle. Okay, I'm on a Mac, I love the Mac, it does a lot of good stuff, but I still need a couple of those leftover things in virtual machines. So, what's your recommendation on the virtual machines?
Well, I had gone through probably virtually everything out there. I had started a project several months back called the Ultimate Analysis Laptop. That one kind of got sidelined, and I'm planning on resurrecting that one here in the next couple of months. And I'd started with, I'd use, what's the one that's really good on the Mac? It's Parallels.
Parallels, yeah.
And that one is you want to see Vista or XP just absolutely haul on a Mac and beat the pants off an Intel, full Intel machine, this will do it. The problem I got into, and they are supposedly going to correct this, is that the database the way it's set up, the virtual drives would not translate from Windows to Mac. So if you had a virtual machine all set up on the Windows side, you couldn't just transfer that file to the Mac. So that means you were constantly redoing things. VMware has a respected name in the industry, especially if you're working in a larger shop during the day like I do. I mean, we've got we're probably one of VMware's better customers out in the Midwest. But that gets into your pockets too. Well, somebody had introduced me a while back to VirtualBox, and it's the first one I found that was across the board, Mac, Windows, and they've even got a Linux version, so you can literally produce the machine once, and you can run it across all the different platforms. The only thing you probably want to watch is when you're moving a virtual machine from one platform to another, watch your MAC address, because it will generate a new one as you move it to a machine. So if you're expecting a certain result or you're looking for certain things on the network, you may want to manually tweak that part. But other than that, that's it. The only thing I hope that now that Oracle has acquired this, that they do like IBM did with Lotus. They just let it be, because it's a fantastic product.
Okay, and then another thing you'd mentioned was, and for our audience here on wireless, is running Wireshark wirelessly. I've went through a personal process of getting Wireshark running native on my Mac. A couple weeks ago, I was out at Shark Fest and amazed at how many people this year had Macs rather than PCs. It was up pretty close to 50%, which was kind of amazing for that audience. Our running native Wireshark in OS X runs well off of the single NIC you have, but it's kind of a pain to jump in to change channels. There's no tool to change channels. You have to go do it at the command line and then restart Wireshark, kind of a pain. But you can also run Wireshark in a VM. And what's your experience there running Wireshark in a VM?
It's doable. It takes a little bit of getting used to. You certainly want to be very careful in how much you're trying to capture, because you can overload a virtual machine very quickly. So that's something to keep in mind. And it's to me, if I'm doing something very granular, I will have a tendency to want to do it on the Windows side, because the way that Wireshark currently presents itself on the Mac, it natively comes up in IPv6. I don't think in IPv6. It's probably going to be several years before I will think in IPv6. And so you have to kind of, first I thought I'd installed it wrong. And no, it's just the way it defaults to displaying. It leads with IPv6. So it just kind of takes a little bit getting used to. But, I go into my ebook about how to do that, because I spent probably, I was over 2 hours figuring out how to get Wireshark to install, because a bunch of things are hidden from you going into it that, unless you're familiar with the Mac, you don't think about. And, once you understand the steps, then it's just, you do it, you get it installed, and that's it. You're done.
Well, that's for native. I've run Wireshark in a VM, running the Air PCAP USB adapter. No problem whatsoever. It just works great on the Mac environment. Another example that works under the VM side, and have some friends up in Boise who work with the MetaGeek group, the little WiSpy adapters. They do all of their development on the Mac platform in VMs. All our developers use Macs, and WiSpy doesn't currently run native on a Mac, but it runs great via the USB port and the USB coming into VMware. So another thing to look there. What about firewalls? What did you find there to help you along those lines?
Well, and one thing now, I have found a tool, and this was through the folks at MetaGeek, because I did, probably like you did, I did beat them up at Interop last year about, hey guys, how about those of us on the Mac? There is one actually called Kismac that it gives you similar functionality in a native Mac application. So it's at least a possibility. Now, firewalls, I was a little surprised that by default the Mac ships with the firewall turned off. Of course, I guess for so many years I was used to the paranoia that is Windows, where they turned it on by default. and you can turn it on, but it basically is a one-way firewall. It only protects you from what's coming in from the outside. If you have an application that's a chatty Cathy or something that you just want to know what's going on, that's where there's an add-on that actually is kind of what I'll call a reverse firewall. It's something called Little Snitch, and it actually tells you when something's phoning home, much like the old Zone Alarm firewall would do. It would tell you if you had an application that was trying to talk to the outside and who it was trying to talk to. Little Snitch is very much like that. Without a license, it will run for like 3 hours and then quit. And if you want it running full time, the license is fairly nominal in terms of what you and I both spent for some applications. I typically don't leave that running all the time. It's only if I'm firing something up new or I've done a major update to a program that I kind of want to know what's going on, because I was amazed at how often just sitting idle that the MacBook phones home to Apple. That surprised me.
Like dumping what kind of information did you see?
Well, basically it would be checking to see if you had updates, and it seemed like it was checking the clock a little more than I would have thought. But, I had to be honest, I haven't watched Windows that close to see how much it checks on some of this. It just surprised me that, that some things I saw Apple checking as much as it did.
Well, I'm going to have to go get that little snitch and find out and have it snitch on what my Mac's doing now.
Yeah, it was an eye opener. It's well worth to have, especially if you're working with something new for the first time, and you just kind of want to see what kind of background chatter is going out of the Mac. At least kind of use like Laura Chappell says, kind of gives you an idea of a baseline of what to expect.
Then the last little section on your ebook, and by the way, the ebook is available for free to download off of Ron Nutter's website. It'll be in the show notes, so the link, you can just pick it up from there. You talked about some other software that you run, OpenOffice and some other notebook software. Can you tell us your journey through finding those tools?
Well, OpenOffice is something I had used for several years because I was just so tired of the expense, and it seemed like every time Microsoft came out with a new version, they basically threw out the interface and started over, and so I would spend hours trying to find the functions that I had used before, and I'm nowhere near a power user, but certain things I will use quite frequently. So OpenOffice now is a native Mac application where about 2 years ago you had to actually fire up an X11 window and then it would start to work. But it's been a progression. And kind of keeping track, like you and I both are producing several podcasts. So writing the scripts up and kind of having your ideas organized. I mean, could I do it in OpenOffice? Sure. Then I've got hundreds or thousands of files spread all over the place. I got to remember how the directories are named, where to find things. And with the application called Notebook from Circus Pony Software, that got me to where I had, a notebook, or possibly if it's something major, I may have more than one notebook. But right now I've pretty much been able to do it with one, where I'll have the different tabs for the audio podcast that I do when I'm starting to research something I may want to do for a video podcast. And it helps me keep things a lot more organized. And, with most of the Mac applications, the license cost, wasn't bad. The one thing that I probably did the most looking on was a password application, because, Keith, I'm as guilty as anybody of using probably a couple of passwords a lot more than I should.
Say it's not so, Ron.
Well, at least I won't mention a particular real estate agency in the East. I walked into one of their offices one day, and here's the teleprinter over on the side with the username and password written down. And when I told a realtor I knew, they about died, because that was about just short of getting hung for being caught doing that, of having that's written down in the open. Of all the different applications out there, I wanted something that was cross-platform, because with having a MacBook Pro, with having a Mac Mini, with having the iPad, with having the iPhone, and I do have a few Windows machines thrown around for good measure, but having something that I could easily synchronize the passwords between systems. And when I say synchronize, I'm not talking about copying the data file, which is what you have to do with a lot of the applications. This one, you basically will go into the synchronization function, and if it's a Mac or iPad, whatever, it will see the other device out there if it's got the M-Secure application up and running, and you just click synchronize on one of them, and they start chatting between themselves, and it's done in a matter of seconds. And it's a little more involved to set up to transfer from Windows machine, But, I typically don't transfer from Windows that much. I was just trying to find a way of getting started. And then, because my biggest concern, Keith, is if I'm out somewhere and I change a password in MSecure on my iPhone, but then I made a different change in MSecure on my Mac Mini or the MacBook Pro. Okay, that's getting that all set to where it merges together and I don't lose one, or worse yet, both of the changes I just made. And it's yet to do that with me. So I can synchronize between all of them and I don't worry about it.
Well, Ron, thanks for your time today. That was a nice overview. There's even more involved and some details on how you can do some of the things that Ron did in his free ebook. Again, the ebook's title is Network Engineer's Guide for Moving from Windows to the Mac. And Ron's been through that, and as a member of the press and a book author, he does a good job in describing some of the steps to take. Ron, how can people find you on the net?
Well, like most of us, Keith, you can go to Google and usually hunt things down, especially now that I've got my WordPress-based site up and running and did the search engine optimization. But if you don't find it with that way, then it's www.ronnutter, and it's RONNUTTER.com. Okay.
And how about on Network World, where they find your articles you've written there?
That has kind of got moved around. My column was originally called Help Desk, and it's been moved over, a little over a year ago, to where now you'll see something called ITAA, IT Asked and Answered.
And on the last one, how do they find you on Twitter?
Twitter is all one word. It's Ronald Nutter. RONALDNUTTER. And
so Ron's got a new website. It's got quite a few. What do you have, 6 or 8 new videos you've got posted up there already, plus this ebook. I can strongly recommend having people go out and check out his new website at ronnutter.com. Is that correct? And the links will be in the show notes. And you can track down Ron at Ronald Nutter on Twitter. Thanks for your time today, and thanks for listening to episode 24 of Wireless LAN Weekly.
Thank you, Keith.
Hey, being a professional means more than just knowing the technical. Now it's time to soften up and talk about the non-techie side for a minute. Slow down, put your feet up, and listen up to these items to help you on the professional side. Enjoy.
In the soft skills section of today's episode 24 of Wireless LAN Weekly, this is Keith Parsons. I'll be talking a little bit about an iPad adventure over the last week. This last week I went on a family vacation for a couple of days, maybe 4 or 5 days, back to New York, and saw wonderful sights back there. I had no idea there was so much forest in New York State. It's forested everywhere. And coming from a guy who lives in Utah up in the high desert, trees are an anomaly, and there you're just surrounded by them. And I drove for hours in trees. It was amazing. Along the process, though, I decided for this week, and the last couple of weeks as I've been on the road doing training and consulting, I've taken along an iPad and the iPad on the plane, and then I'd leave the laptop, the MacBook Pro, in the hotel room. And I wouldn't use it during the day, but at night the MacBook Pro was back around. For this family vacation, I thought, okay, I'm gonna kind of go cold turkey, and I'm gonna go iPad only. It was an iPad only week. I started the week out with no laptop, and finished the week after 7 days later, and it had done an iPad only just to see if it could be done, and it was amazing. There was very, very few things that I actually needed to do. During the middle of the week, I had to borrow a laptop to do one feature, and it was in Mobile Me. I had to delete a user off. And right now, they've updated the iPad's Mobile Me feature so that when you call in off an iPad and you hit the Mobile Me website, it gives you a special version which doesn't have the administrative functions on it. So I had to come in through a laptop instead, just do that one little administrative function. Other than that, email, Twitter, Facebook, web pages, obviously reading the news, watching movies, everything on the iPad went really well. I didn't miss a keyboard. I was going to bring along a small Bluetooth keyboard just in case. and yet I found myself writing quite a bit just off the normal keypad that's on there. If it's a short thing, I'll hold it vertically in portrait mode and type with my thumbs. If it's a little longer and I have a desk in front of me, and this is only if there's a place to place the iPad, I can't quite do it when I hold it. I just type with normal typing. Probably not quite normal. I don't use all my fingers like I would in touch typing. It's more, it looks like the old-fashioned newspaper man with 2 fingers or 4 fingers, 2 on each hand, typing away, kind of plugging away. But it does really, really well. I have no complaints about it. So it actually is possible to live a life of an IT guy with only an iPad. I took pictures with digital cameras, brought them in, edited them, cropped them, did all of that on the iPad, took care of all the email work that I needed to get done, all on the iPad alone. So I can foresee in the future, as we move more and more toward tablets, that could take over a lot of the work that a laptop would do. Now, for hardcore data manipulation and definitely when you're going to do a lot of content creation, I would recommend a laptop, obviously. In fact, when I got home late Sunday night, first thing I did was fire up the laptop and work on a couple of things that I needed it for. But for a week without a laptop to go with an iPad only, it was pretty good. So just wanted to put a little blurb here at the end of episode 24 to talk about that it is possible to run your iPad alone. If anyone knows of a site survey tool running on the iPad, and I've been asking all over, and I've heard from multiple sources that different teams are working on this. As soon as anybody gets one out that's ready to go, I'll be all over it. It is the perfect site survey tool. It's the right size, right shape. I use a leather case for this from a company called Marware, M-A-R-W-A-R-E, Marware, and it makes the iPad look like a little leather folio, a little easy to carry around little thing. Works fantastic. So can't give enough props out to running your life on an iPad alone. Thanks for listening on Wireless LAN Weekly, episode 24, and we'll see you back next week. We'll have some new content for you, some new technology, and some new soft skills. Thanks again for listening. Bye.
Wireless LAN Weekly, a podcast focused on the needs of wireless LAN professionals. We look forward to your feedback. Please leave your comments at the bottom of the show notes, or email feedback on the show can be sent to feedback@wirelesslanprofessionals.com. If you'd like to leave a voicemail feedback, just call 24/7 and leave a message at 1-801-481-9018. Until next time, this has been another production of wirelesslanprofessionals.com, a place to educate, inform, entertain, and inspire.